A royal commentator said something on live television recently that I genuinely think deserves considerably more scrutiny than it initially received when it first aired. That there have reportedly been actual meetings, specifically meetings, not parties, not red carpet appearances, between Meghan and extremely wealthy individuals in Los Angeles.
Said, do you know her? No, she said, she just came up to us because, she thought, oh, we're a trial and we're with very rich grand people. So she never misses an opportunity to make a connection.
And sitting right there, listening to that claim without objection, was the woman who spent 2 years writing Harry's own biography and, by every account, still genuinely likes him. What she offered instead wasn't a defense. According to Angela Levin, Meghan has apparently been pursuing considerably wealthier company for some time now, and whatever's currently keeping her connected to Harry may have less to do with love than with simply not having found something better yet.
Obviously, she can say, well, look, I'm needing professional investment or all of that type of thing. But Burrell's suggestion and your suggestion seems to be also if something romantic presented itself.
I want to genuinely work through, carefully and in order, where this particular theory actually comes from, what real evidence exists to support it, and where I think it clearly overreaches beyond what the facts can actually sustain, because there is a real substantive story sitting here. But it's considerably more complicated than any single dramatic claim on its own manages to convey. Let's start with where this narrative traces back to, because according to multiple commentators, it didn't begin with Harry at all.
Do you think that potentially Meghan is starting to realize Harry is not all that and she's going to have to go her own way and pursue a sort of Jeff Bezos type of character for the dreams that she wants to live? Because we know she doesn't want to step foot in Britain again, and I know that she has, but I don't know if she'll be stepping foot in London anytime soon.
Well, I think you're spot on in her terms of her ambition, but I don't think, with due respect, she's known for a very long time that Harry didn't have the money that she would have liked him to have.
A panel of royal watchers reportedly identified footballer Ashley Cole as an earlier interest before Harry ever entered the picture. Then, in September 2015, Meghan reportedly sent an unsolicited late-night message to Piers Morgan, a screenshot he's apparently kept and referenced since. And according to biographer Tom Bower, citing an account from Meghan's own former agent, she reportedly told that agent she'd done extensive research into Harry's life before their first date was even scheduled. Not casual curiosity, but by this account, deliberate preparation.
He also initially deceived her into thinking that he was more powerful than he was. And so each of them was deceiving the other, but she deceived him into thinking they could move to America and they could compete with William and Catherine. So William and Catherine would have Britain and the Commonwealth, they would have the rest of the world, and they would be the global royal couple, which of course hasn't happened because Meghan is as incompetent as Harry is in terms of finance.
Royal commentator Lady Colin Campbell has posed what I think is genuinely the sharpest question in this entire narrative. Would the interest have existed at all if Harry hadn't been a prince specifically? That's a fair question to sit with, though I'd add immediately that it's also a question that could reasonably be asked about plenty of relationships involving people with status, wealth, or fame. Attraction to someone's position isn't unique to this specific story, even if it's worth examining honestly here. It's worth pausing here to acknowledge a genuinely fair alternative reading before moving further into the more suspicious version of events.
The way they have behaved and the way they have treated the people of this country and their behavior has been just beyond belief.
Completely. I mean, they've actually been routinely dragging the royal family through hell.
Doing thorough research on someone before a first date isn't inherently sinister behavior on its own. Plenty of people, particularly those entering relationships with individuals who carry significant public profiles or complicated family situations, would reasonably want to understand exactly what they're getting into before committing emotionally. Reading that specific detail as evidence of calculated pursuit rather than reasonable due diligence requires assuming the worst interpretation of an act that could just as easily reflect genuine caution. Now, the wedding itself, which I think offers considerably more concrete, verifiable material to actually examine. Biographer Tom Bower has reportedly noted the specific composition of the 2018 guest list, describing many of Harry's own friends as notably absent, while Meghan's Hollywood connections, including high-profile names and industry contacts, filled much of the chapel. Tina Brown, the former Vanity Fair editor, went further in her own assessment, suggesting the guest list reflected not existing friendships, but rather relationships Meghan hoped to cultivate going forward.
And that ridiculous story about how they first met. The whole thing was a tissue of inaccuracies, to be polite, because, of course, I got the real story that he got a blind date and was called up and all that. And this is the other thing, which is one of the many, many lies she tells, that she arrived in London, full career, single girl, wasn't interested. Of course, she'd been coming to London since 2013, hunting for a man to marry. She wanted an Englishman.
Andrew Morton, who's covered this family since Diana, reportedly summarized her broader approach in a phrase worth sitting with: a networker to her fingertips. If this kind of pattern tracking interests you, the like button genuinely helps this channel keep digging into stories that deserve more than surface treatment. It's also worth being fair about wedding guest lists more broadly, because this is genuinely common territory across countless weddings involving people with significant public profiles or expanding professional networks.
Does have somebody else. It will be some kind of older, really rich man.
Tycoon.
Well, an
and then
Arab
she'll say,
prince.
You watch.
Weddings frequently include a mix of long-standing friends alongside newer, more aspirational connections. That's not unique to Meghan specifically, and treating it as uniquely damning here risks applying a standard that most high-profile weddings across entertainment and public life wouldn't actually meet either. There's a documented trajectory worth laying out here in more detail, though, because it's genuinely less speculative than some of what follows and offers a clearer factual foundation. In 2012, Meghan reportedly connected with Markus Anderson, the Soho House membership director, known for curating access to influential social circles.
Harry just can't give her anything else anymore. He served his purpose. His purpose is over, and they're no longer aligned in purpose. So for her, it's time to move on.
Through that connection came Jessica Mulroney, whose father-in-law had served as Canadian Prime Minister. By 2014, Meghan was reportedly appearing at genuinely significant international forums alongside considerably prominent global figures. Former United Nations officials, well-known humanitarian leaders, and other established names in that specific space. That's a genuinely real traceable pattern of expanding social and professional access unfolding over several distinct years, and it's entirely fair to note it as clear evidence of genuine ambition and real networking skill on its own terms, regardless of whatever broader conclusions you ultimately choose to draw from it.
She will take her royal kids, who can still go by prince and princess, and find the billionaire, like you say, who actually will just keep her in the manner to which she like to become accustomed.
Now here's where I want to actually test the friendship pattern theory properly, because if the claim is that Meghan systematically drops people once they've served their purpose, that should be verifiable by looking at who's actually disappeared from her life. Nanaki Pretty, Meghan's childhood friend and a bridesmaid at her first wedding, has spoken publicly about the friendship ending, describing what she characterized as a sudden, complete shift once Meghan's life changed direction.
She doesn't want a pauper. She doesn't want another pauper Angela like Harry. You know that he's not rich enough for her. Okay.
That story has been covered extensively elsewhere, so I won't retread the specifics here. What hasn't been discussed as much are several other names worth including. Lizzie Cundy, who knew Meghan socially in London before her royal life began, has described their relationship in fairly transactional terms, suggesting people served a purpose and were moved past once that purpose was fulfilled. Millie McIntosh has reportedly described being abruptly cut off. Gina Nelthorpe-Cowan, Meghan's UK agent for roughly 2 years, has offered a more detailed account, describing a later encounter where she reportedly wasn't acknowledged directly, with Harry instead approaching to speak with her, which she read as a deliberately managed interaction.
It gets trickier because these billionaires can sense one thing. When you're not looking for a partner, you're looking for a solution.
Publicist Nick Ida, who reportedly helped open professional doors for Meghan early on, has described a similar pattern of sudden distance afterward. And Piers Morgan, the recipient of that 2015 late-night message, has publicly and repeatedly described being cut off entirely once Meghan met Harry. It's genuinely worth naming, before we get to the necessary skepticism, why 6 separate accounts spanning 3 decades carries real weight as evidence, even accounting for individual context. A single disputed friendship ending could reasonably be attributed to any number of ordinary, non-sinister causes.
I think she's been after people who are extraordinarily rich for quite a long time now. And I don't know whether they're not interested in her or she hasn't fancied them, but she's still hanging on to Harry because she can't find the right person.
People simply grow apart, priorities shift, circumstances change. 6 separate accounts from people with no obvious connection to each other, independently describing a similar dynamic of sudden coldness following a shift in usefulness, is considerably harder to dismiss as pure coincidence across every single instance. Now, I want to be genuinely and thoroughly fair here regardless, because a pattern this specific and this consequential genuinely deserves careful scrutiny rather than uncritical acceptance simply because it fits a compelling narrative. Pretty's account emerged partly in the context of taking her ex-husband's side during a divorce. Worth noting as potential context, not automatic disqualification. Millie McIntosh has suggested the falling out may have involved specific professional disagreements around a television project rather than pure social calculation.
I think it won't be enough for Meghan and it won't be enough for Harry. And she will just go off and her next step is a billionaire because she's got millions. So why not step up to a billionaire? And why not go for politics? Why not become governor of California?
Morgan has maintained public commentary about this specific grievance for the better part of a decade, which is worth factoring into how much weight his particular account carries. None of that necessarily makes any individual account false. It does mean treating 6 separate stories as an airtight uniform pattern oversimplifies what are actually 6 different situations with their own individual context. What's harder to dismiss is who's reportedly still present. Doria Ragland, tennis champion Serena Williams, stylist Misha Nonu, and Markus Anderson, the original Soho House connection from 2012, all reportedly remain visible in Meghan's life more than a decade later.
And we know that she is developing friendships, shall we say, with numerous billionaires who could, of course, come in handy for lots of reasons.
That's a genuinely real, specific, and fairly telling detail worth sitting with carefully, regardless of exactly how you personally end up genuinely reading the various friendships that apparently didn't survive over the years. There's a broader pattern worth naming across all 6 accounts too, one that cuts against the simplest villain reading. Every single one of these relationships apparently provided Meghan with something genuinely valuable at the time. Access, connections, professional opportunities, social standing. That's worth stating plainly rather than glossing over, because it means the accounts aren't describing random cruelty. They're describing, at minimum, relationships that had a transactional element woven through them from fairly early on, which is a considerably more common and more human pattern than pure calculated exploitation, even if it's still worth examining honestly.
He is aimless. He doesn't know what he's going to do. I always see him like a kind of well-trained racehorse in the way that he doesn't know what to do outside the tracks, and Montecito is very much outside the track.
Now let's talk about this year specifically, because something genuinely notable and genuinely underreported happened that complicates the billionaire-pursuit theory considerably more than it confirms it. Meghan was reportedly not invited to this year's Met Gala, one of fashion's most significant annual events, and a room that matters enormously for anyone building a lifestyle or fashion-adjacent brand. Ingrid Seward, who's covered this family editorially for decades, reportedly framed the absence in fairly blunt commercial terms, suggesting that visibility at that specific event would have meaningfully boosted Meghan's market value and relevance. Here's the detail that genuinely undercuts the simple billionaire-chasing narrative, though. The Met Gala's current sponsors reportedly include Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez. And according to multiple reports, Meghan and Lauren Sánchez had an earlier relationship that reportedly soured.
Harry came from this very busy world of the royal family with lots to do. Even in his spare time, he could play polo and do whatever he wanted. He sat in Montecito, twiddling his thumbs, thinking, what do I do next? What is my role? Where is my work?
With Meghan reportedly having made a dismissive comment about her at some point before Sanchez's marriage to one of the world's wealthiest men. If that account is accurate, it suggests Meghan alienated exactly the kind of connection the billionaire-pursuit theory would predict her actively cultivating, which is a genuine complication worth taking seriously rather than glossing over. The pattern reportedly extends further. Relationships with the Kardashian family reportedly cooled following tension connected to a birthday celebration last year. Elton John and David Furnish, once reportedly close, have reportedly grown distant. The Obamas, the Clooneys, Oprah, and Gwyneth Paltrow have all reportedly maintained varying degrees of separation in recent coverage.
Meghan has been blessed and privileged. I'm going to treat people as I would want to be treated. She then turns the other way, which just shows a lack of class.
She didn't like it.
Yeah, you can take the girl out of the gutter, right?
But remember, she was treating people like this before she was in the royal family. That's the thing.
True.
This is part of her
Hollywood?
personality.
One read on this pattern, offered by commentators discussing it, is that high-profile figures who don't specifically need the association tend to step back once any friction arises, since there's little professional upside to being publicly linked with someone facing sustained criticism. Perhaps the clearest evidence sits in Meghan's own Netflix production. Despite significant budget and production resources, the guest roster reportedly didn't include any of these previously mentioned major names. No Obamas, no Clooneys, no Elton John. The most recognizable name to appear was reportedly Chrissy Teigen. If Meghan genuinely maintained the extensive high-profile network the billionaire theory assumes, that seems like exactly the platform where those connections would have been showcased.
She genuinely did get duped in some sort of way. She thought that she was marrying a multi-billionaire. That's how she saw Harry. Unfortunately, the reality of when she came to him, he was living in Frogmore Cottage with his sort of stash and his picked-apart couch. She found very quickly that he, first of all, is not a cash cow. He's got some inheritance. And second of all, he's useless outside of the royal gates and totally useless in America.
It's worth sitting with what the Lauren Sánchez detail specifically suggests, if it's accurate, because it genuinely complicates the calculated strategist reading in a meaningful way. A person purely and coldly executing a plan to accumulate wealthy connections would presumably work hard to maintain relationships with exactly the kind of person Sanchez represents. Someone with genuine access, genuine wealth, and reportedly genuine early interest in friendship. Alienating that specific connection, whatever the actual reason, doesn't fit neatly into a story about someone methodically climbing toward billionaire access. It suggests something messier is actually happening underneath the surface narrative. So here's the actual, more complicated picture that emerges once you genuinely hold both of these competing threads together simultaneously.
Her demands, this director said, were worse than any other actor he had worked with, and he had worked with true A-listers. She would demand private jets if there was not a first-class flight.
Reported interest in cultivating extremely wealthy connections, alongside reported friction that's apparently cost her access to some of the wealthiest and most influential people she might have once been connected to. That's a more complicated story than pure calculated social climbing. It suggests someone whose approach to relationships, whatever its underlying motivation, hasn't been purely, cleanly successful even on its own apparent terms. It's genuinely worth adding one more layer of nuance before moving to Harry specifically, because the pattern across an entire career of relationship volatility, cutting both directions. Some friendships apparently ended by Meghan, others apparently ending because prominent figures pulled away from her specifically, doesn't obviously point in one clean direction. It's entirely possible that some version of both dynamics is genuinely true simultaneously. A person with real, demonstrated networking skill and ambition, who has also, at various points, made choices or comments that have cost her exactly the kind of high-value relationships that ambition would presumably want to preserve. Now, on Harry specifically, because I genuinely think the sympathy for Harry framing running through a lot of this broader commentary deserves real direct pushback. Lady Colin Campbell, when directly offered a simple, comfortable victim narrative live on air, specifically the suggestion that Harry had somehow duped Meghan into believing he possessed considerably more personal wealth than he actually does, explicitly and firmly rejected that entire framing outright, refusing to let the easier, more sympathetic story go unchallenged. Her assessment was that Meghan had reportedly understood Harry's actual financial position for years, and that Harry had, in her characterization, offered something else entirely: institutional power and prestige rather than personal fortune. Her conclusion was that both parties entered the relationship with clear-eyed understanding of what they were actually getting, each pursuing what the other genuinely offered. That's a considerably more balanced and considerably more intellectually honest read than either a purely one-sided victim framing or a purely one-sided villain framing genuinely allows for, and I think it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed, simply because it doesn't provide a clean, satisfying resolution for either side of this ongoing public argument. When directly asked where responsibility for the broader family rupture actually sits, Lady Campbell reportedly placed primary weight on Meghan's choices, while explicitly describing Harry's role using the word connivance rather than simple naivety, meaning, in her reading, active participation rather than passive victimhood. I want to flag this directly and clearly before moving forward. Some commentary circulating around this specific topic has used considerably harsher, more dehumanizing language than I genuinely think is fair or productive to repeat verbatim here on this channel. including characterizations that go well beyond legitimate substantive criticism into territory that effectively reduces an actual living person to something closer to a caricature or a villain in a story rather than a genuine human being navigating a genuinely difficult and heavily scrutinized situation. I'm not going to repeat that specific language because I don't think it adds anything except heat, and it's the kind of framing that tends to say more about the person using it than about its actual subject. What's genuinely worth taking seriously, instead of that harsher framing, is the considerably more measured version of essentially the same underlying argument, that Harry, whatever genuine sympathy his broader circumstances and personal history might reasonably deserve, made his own deliberate choices as a fully grown adult, with complete institutional knowledge and significant personal resources readily available to him throughout the entire process. He wasn't, by any reasonable account of his own upbringing and lived experience, genuinely naive to the actual realities of royal life, personal wealth, institutional power, or the intense scrutiny that inevitably accompanies public relationships at this specific level of visibility. Treating him purely and exclusively as a victim throughout this entire story, several separate commentators have independently suggested meaningfully obscures his own genuine agency in a whole series of decisions that ultimately reshaped an entire family's public standing and institutional relationships for years to come. There's also a reported detail worth including with appropriate caution, since it involves quotes attributed to specific named individuals that deserve some skepticism absent direct verification. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly offered a brief, dismissive characterization of Meghan in conversation with a royal biographer. Media personality Billy Bush has reportedly described William as harboring genuine frustration toward both his brother's choices and Meghan specifically. These are specifically attributed quotes reportedly relayed secondhand, rather than independently confirmed statements made directly on the record by either man personally, and I genuinely think it's fair and appropriate to include them here as part of the broader commentary landscape surrounding this entire story, while remaining completely honest and upfront about that meaningful evidentiary limitation attached to both of them. So where does this genuinely leave the underlying central question that started this entire video? Is Harry currently, in effect, being kept around as some kind of placeholder, as this specific theory rather bluntly suggests, until something reportedly better eventually comes along? I genuinely, honestly don't think the currently available evidence supports that specific claim as anything resembling confirmed, settled fact at this point in time. What the evidence genuinely does support instead is a considerably messier, less tidy overall picture. A marriage that multiple commentators across genuinely different platforms and different outlets have independently characterized as noticeably strained, sitting alongside a well-documented pattern of relationship volatility that clearly predates Harry entirely and appears to have continued well since their marriage began, further complicated by very real verifiable losses of access. The Met Gala snub specifically, the Lauren Sánchez fallout, several previously close celebrity friendships that have reportedly cooled, all of which cuts directly and meaningfully against the simple, tidy billionaire hunting narrative being confidently presented elsewhere. What seems considerably more likely, based on genuinely everything we've walked through and examined here tonight, isn't a woman calmly and coldly executing a carefully designed long-term plan to trade up to someone wealthier. It's someone whose relationship patterns across multiple different contexts and multiple different decades show real volatility, sometimes to her benefit, sometimes clearly not. That's genuinely a more complicated, more textured, more human story than either the purely sympathetic victim narrative or the coldly calculating villain narrative manages to fully capture on its own. And I think the honest version of this story requires holding on to that complexity rather than flattening it into whichever version generates the most dramatic headline. What do you genuinely think, having sat through everything we've actually walked through together tonight? Does the available evidence here truly support the billionaire-pursuit theory in the confident way it's being presented across a lot of current commentary? Or does the Met Gala snub and the specific Lauren Sánchez fallout undercut that entire narrative considerably more than the commentators pushing it seem willing to openly acknowledge? And separately, do you genuinely buy Lady Colin Campbell's mutual deception framing of this entire marriage? The idea that both parties went in with clear eyes and got roughly what they were actually looking for? Or does that particular reading let Harry off considerably too easily, given everything else we've discussed tonight about his own choices and his own institutional knowledge going into all of this? Let me know your genuinely honest take on all of this down in the comments below. I read every single response, and they genuinely do shape which stories we decide to dig into next on this channel. And if you genuinely want more breakdowns like this one, the kind that actually try to test these popular theories against the available evidence, rather than simply repeating whichever version sounds most dramatic and most clickable, go ahead and subscribe to Palace Insider right now so you catch the next one the moment it drops. And if tonight's video gave you something genuinely worth thinking about, even if you ended up disagreeing with parts of it, drop a like on your way out. It genuinely helps this channel keep reaching more people who care about getting the fuller picture rather than just the headline version.